Just one point of order. There is someone on a phone. The number is 508-596-6658.
Yep, that's me.
Who's
Jeff
me?
Moffa.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
All right.
Jeff.
Thank you. Okay. I'm just going to rename him. Okay. And okay. Cool. All right, Brian.
All right. 1 second. All right. I would like to officially call to order.
Oh, I've got it, but no noise. In other words, I haven't got
They're
any.
probably hearing what you're saying. Better be quiet.
Yes, we can hear you, Jeff.
That's
I'm
what
going to
happened
mute
last
you.
time.
Jeff, I'm going to mute you.
That's not me.
No, Jeff, not
Different Jeff.
Martha. There's another Jeff on the call.
Oh.
All right, Brian, if you want to open, I will message the other Jeff and just let
Yep.
them know.
Perfect. All right. So I would like to officially call to order the Tuesday, January 10th, 2023 meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission. And pursuant to the extension of Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, this public meeting of the Town of Bolton Conservation Commission is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but the public can access this meeting while in progress by Zoom video communications. And members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comment by telephone, cell phone, or personal computer using Zoom. A few guidelines for that. Please utilize the chat or raise hand function if you wish to address the board. Everybody remains on mute until they're actually addressed, and participants are required to display their first and last names. All that said, per tradition, we will start with a roll call. I am Brian Barabee.
Paul Brandvold.
Jim Garrity.
Jillian Glasanos.
Rebecca Longwall, or excuse me, Rebecca Bachaya. I
You'll
forget.
get that straight one of these days. Okay. Rebecca, this is a continuation, right? The first notice of intent, right? Yeah.
That is correct.
All
Yep.
right, so the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider a notice of intent for the construction of subdivision roadway and stormwater infrastructure on South Bolton Road, map 2.C, parcel 16.
I don't know if it's possible, but Brian Millsy, the engineer, had asked if it was possible to come back later tonight on this. He just had a conflict. If not, that's fine. We can move forward with what we have.
I mean, what's later tonight, I guess?
I guess I was literally just told this just now, so I apologize.
No, that's all right.
He was just also first on the list for 7 o'clock at another conservation meeting in another town. So
Yep.
He just said if possible, if not, we've kind of submitted all the information, and I believe the botanist who marked the wetlands was Matt. He was going to be on the call. I can't see. I'm unfortunately on my phone.
I got you.
He doesn't seem to be on the call. And
Okay.
to note, we have public hearings until 8:20. So
Okay,
the
got it.
commission would have to put it to like 8:30 or something, the earliest, just to note to the chair about how that schedule works. Typically, it's not unheard of that occurs, but normally we don't have such a full agenda. Normally it's maybe
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
couple hearings.
And we
whatever.
started
Like I said, I can with what limited knowledge I have, I can try to help. And I've been it's been kind of weird. I've been dealing with all the planning board stuff, and then my brother and Brian has been doing all the conservation stuff. So I've been included
Gotcha.
on all of it, but Just obviously Brian has all the knowledge.
I was gonna say, we started a few minutes late tonight. I think our next hearing's at 7:20. I'm fine tabling it if you're more comfortable, if you're okay waiting until 8:30. I think we can clear some other things off our agenda and basically some of the stuff we would have done at 8:30 anyways. If you would prefer, I mean, we can talk through it now, but if you prefer, I'm okay tabling it until, our last hearing.
That's fine. That way I can let Brian, the engineer, know, and hopefully he can join us by that point.
They may be able to get better answers to our questions just to make
Yep,
everything. smooth.
yeah.
All right.
Yep. Yeah.
All right. So tabled for now. We will begin discussing this probably as soon as our last public hearing ends.
Thank you.
Brian, I will also write that in the chat, just so anyone joining.
I
for
pressed
that
every
item.
button and nothing in the camera.
Okay, sorry.
All right.
Sorry about that.
No.
I'll put it in the chat so anyone coming in to see that will understand it's been tabled.
About 8:30 or 8:25 or.
Yep, if you would like, I can go over the enforcement order updates and then some of the business until we hit 7:20.
I would appreciate that. And again, I have to say, I did not have a chance to read through the minutes yet. So if we could table that and
Table.
approve 2 minutes at next meeting, that would be wonderful.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Perfect. All right, so next meeting, you'll have 2 sets of minutes to approve. Okay, so the enforcement order updates that we have is the first being on 100 East End Road. This was an area that was, the property received a determination to allow for a garage and memorialize a boulder line that memorializes the 100-foot area, and actually the inner riparian, or excuse me, the outer riparian area as well. And those boulders had not been put in place because they chose to do something different with the garage. Unfortunately, because those weren't put in place, it was not apparently carried through the knowledge that this was a resource area. They needed permits for it. They couldn't be disturbing it. They had to leave it as the meadow area that it was. So the area became unstable. There was motorized vehicles driven through it. So since that time, I've been out to review the site twice. They have stabilized the area adjacent to the pond that's on their property in that same proximity. They have installed silt fence. Then they did try to seed, but unfortunately the seed hasn't really taken. So come springtime, they will seed the area with a native seed mix and allow it to grow in that meadow. And they have put the line of boulders in at this time as well. So once springtime comes, I'll update the commission and potentially do a site visit with the commission so that there's a view on that point. Then 175 Fox Run Road, that property is in compliance, aside from we are waiting for memorialization of the conservation restriction. They were allowed to use a split rail fence, a line of boulders, or a line of shrubs, native shrubs, and they have not determined which they're choosing to use. So once they do that, I'm happy to, as long as the commission's comfortable with it, put it on the agenda for the commission to consider lifting the enforcement. I did not put 3 John Power Lane on here because we're again waiting till spring, but that property is in compliance as well, aside from that. And then Century Mill Estates, we did get back the wetland consultant's peer review. There are some clear violations there. We are going to continue finding once we get the engineer peer review letter back and or their review back. There was some difficulty with the review because obviously the developer at Century Mill Estates has not been providing the correct information and documentation that needs to be provided. They're actually behind on providing SWIPs and other information. So that makes it a little bit more of a difficult process, clearly, to be reviewing material. So once we receive that from the engineer, whether it's a letter stating what's needed or a review of the material that we were able to give them, then we'll be continuing with those fines that the commission had authorized. Are there any questions about that?
Not from me or my.
Okay. So we have like 2 more minutes for Bolton Trails Connectivity Improvement Project. We did submit all the necessary information. The town has signed the contract. We're just waiting for the state to return the signed contract at this time. Then you will be seeing various emails from me trying to coordinate work days. So if you're interested or know people interested in working on this project, we welcome the efforts. And that will obviously be posted to the town website as well. The Nashua River Communities Resilient Lands Management Project, our current MVP Action Grant project. On every agenda, it is linked to the project website. I had asked the commission to be looking into the policy recommendations, and that is important. As on the 18th, we will be having a joint Concom meeting with Clinton Concom to be reviewing it with our consultants and specifically reviewing any recommendations or the language in that website page as well, or even just the concepts that the commission, the town of Bolton, the planning department as well would like to see in any regulatory language going forward, or any recommendations that you've seen something happen in a past project and you'd really like some clarity through the regulations. And it's really just going through and improving upon what we already have. And then with obviously a lens of climate resiliency. So I would really appreciate your time in reviewing that. You can send me your recommendations, or even if, again, it's just a broad concept and it doesn't have to be the exact regulations that are in that website. I welcome you to email that to me so that I have them before the 18th, but definitely have some thoughts on the 18th, along with bringing yourselves on the 18th. And that will be via Zoom as well. And we're at 7:20, so I'll stop talking.
You did perfectly well. And like we won't have to worry about that at 8:30.
Yes.
All right. 6:42 is also a continuation. So the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider a notice of intent for 642 Main Street, map 2, parcel 20, the replacement of a septic system. Rebecca, is the applicant or someone representing the applicant here this evening? Okay. And
Yes.
I know we had a site visit for this particular property. Is anybody able to give a quick summary or review from the site visit?
Yeah,
Are
we,
you
we,
asking for one of the commissioners to do that, or?
Either way, it's a good question. Yeah, if you're willing, Jim, that would be great.
sure, yeah, so we walked the site, we saw where the tank is, where the current tank is, where the current field is. And we also saw where the new field will be going as well as where the tank is going, relative to the house and relative to the garage that's there as well, and also the property line, which is, I think it's the Bolton Bean property. So it looked, it's certainly tight, but it also fits.
Yeah, and I can just add, Brian, that when you look at this parcel, the everything's within 100-foot buffer, but the actual work is all outside of the 25-foot, and the system itself, I think, is like 50 feet away. So there is some space there. I think it really comes down to the mitigation during construction would be my big question.
I don't know, Jillian, if you were on there, if you have any thoughts, or Rebecca, if you have a summary from the site visit?
I wasn't able to attend.
Okay.
So the summary from the site visit is echoing exactly what they said. I will provide one point of clarification. It's not part of construction, but they're decommissioning the pit, which is within the 25-foot area. So some remediation effort within that area is the only work taking place. But to that point, everything else is outside of the 25-foot area. There is the floodplain, and pretty much all the resource areas are really defined by topography on the site. And the only items that I had asked on site about were continuing the erosion control barrier up to the garage, because the original plans stopped before the garage, and just thinking about limit of work and how the site may be manipulated in terms of during construction, where machinery will be ending up or any stockpiling material, just made sense to basically close out that corner, because you're right on top of a floodplain area. But so this, what I'm highlighting now, is the extension that was put in.
Yep.
So that was included on the revised plans. And then the other item that was discussed in the field was, or rather mentioned in the field as something that the commission might require, is any remediation. So currently this area is maintained, relatively maintained anyways, right up to the floodplain almost. And there are some trees here and there, but it would be beneficial for these areas, particularly within the 100-foot buffer adjacent upland resource area, to see that it's naturalized, to allow for more of a filtration area before it hits the resource area back here, or even to the side here. So I wasn't sure if that wasn't included on the plans. I don't know if it's noted on the plans somewhere in narrative form. I didn't see it, but I could have missed it. But I also was unsure if the commission would require it, so they may have left it off for that reason as well.
Right. And if the applicant's here, just to ask that question, is there anything about remediation near the back end of that site included in the current existing plans?
Sure, I'd like to address that.
Please.
No, there has been nothing added to the plan. It was a point of discussion at the last meeting, as well as on the site walk. And I do recall and took notes about the fact that, you know, under the bylaw, there's a request for mitigation. But the way I'm viewing this, and I'm open to correction here, is that upgrade of a septic system for an existing single-family house is exempt from the bylaw. We've got a fairly small lot here. It's less than an acre in size. About a third of that is wetlands. We've got a fairly small yard area that is going to be now encompassed with this septic system. We don't feel that we want to take away any yard space that has historically been used. We're not making the yard bigger per se. And so we didn't propose anything specifically that would remove yard area that might be used by a future homeowner. But that we're willing to discuss that. I see that Rebecca just outlined something. Is that the area that you had hoped to naturalize?
So that was just a point of clarification for discussion purposes. When I'm talking about naturalizing or allowing an area to be maintained in a lower fashion, in terms of not a higher maintenance area or more impactful maintenance, like regular mowing or anything like that, yes, that's the area that I highlighted in yellow or orange, however you see that color.
Well, my client and I did discuss the ramifications of this. And again, the yard space is relatively small, and we wanted to maintain as much of that as possible. We had thrown out the idea that it would be acceptable to us to restrict any sort of mowing or anything like that within the 25-foot buffer. But the lines being drawn here are really impinging on the current yard space.
Can I say one thing?
Please.
Just watch the lot line on the east side because that yellow line is well beyond the lot line. That's the lot line is
It's right
the
next.
septic
Yep.
system goes right to the lot line on the east side.
I understand that. I'm just doing this quick, Dwayne.
Understood.
So you're coming like this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So again, I'd love to hear the commission's thoughts about the fact that we are upgrading this system. We're taking what I would define as a pretty deplorable condition and making it a whole lot better by getting that leaching area, number one, out of the groundwater table, and number two, out of the 25-foot buffer area. So we're making great improvements here. The other thing, I know that these mitigation efforts are quite often done on new construction projects, and that's where it clearly falls under the bylaw. And so we're just asking for relief in a sense that we just build this and be done with it.
No, I understand. Historically, like we've worked with a number of these lots along Main Street. We understand that it's very limited, the space you have to work with. And I do appreciate sometimes the modern septic is replacing some pretty bad systems that were set up in the past. Our charge, generally speaking, is to avoid these areas if at all possible, which again, working with some of these sites, it's just not really possible. The whole place is in the buffer zone. And then minimize the project if we can. In other words, if this was new construction saying, look, could you do a septic system for a smaller house or something like that, which again, we can't right here. And then third, if we can't, if we can't avoid it and we can't minimize it, to propose some sort of mitigation, something that would, help the buffer zone a little bit more. As Rebecca said, as things are feeding back into that wetlands, we have the 25-foot no touch. Generally speaking, we have the buffer zone off of that. I understand the need for a yard, but in order to kind of mitigate this, would it be possible to give up some of that area past the 25-foot? And by give up, I would say we've done like once a year mowings for places. Where you're allowed to mow it once a year, and it basically grows in as an overgrown meadow, which is it's actually provides some resource area for a number of local flora, fauna, a number of our local insects. It's good for smaller animals, stuff like that. So, you basically still have a yard. The back of that yard, you maybe lose 10 feet before the buffer zone to a once a year mowing place that kind of becomes a little meadowish. And then it's no touch beyond that. Is that something you might be amenable to?
Mr. Henry, I feel that that's a very reasonable compromise. How do you feel about having that be mowed just once a year to control the growth? Is that acceptable to you? Mr. Henry?
He was here. He just
was
Yeah,
gonna
doesn't.
say he was
I
here.
think his image is frozen.
All right. So while if he's reconnecting, I should put it out to the rest of the commission too. Is that something that other commission members would be fine with? Is that something we think we could agree to? Do you want to see more or less?
Fine, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Brian, yeah, because when you look at the site, yes, it's going to be much improved, but
Yes.
there will be
I
a
don't know if you-
runoff to the back. So
Okay.
we don't really know how that will react. So if you could have
Yeah,
some
I
more
mean-
natural vegetation, I think that would be very helpful. Sorry, I think I spoke over Mr. Henry now.
Yeah, I think he's trying to reconnect, but Rebecca has drawn another area there. Is that the area that you would say to be mowed once a year? and left untouched for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I think, I was gonna say, I think if that's how Rebecca's proposing it, and I think that one would work in that it seems like it's at the toe of the slope for the, right, for the septic. So it's kind of almost easily demarcated that basically, you know, to the bottom of that septic hill and across almost, or cutting upwards. And I think
So-
that would give us that 10 feet plus, you know, right before it gets to the 25-foot no touch.
Brian, I would, so what I was drawing here
Yeah.
was I thought you were gonna be asking to allow that area to naturalize, not necessarily mowing. So that's fine if you want to use that as a reference point, but that
Can you
doesn't,
hear me
that-
now? Nope.
yes.
Yes.
Dwayne? No, we can't hear you now, Dwayne. So what I was referring to, or if the commission wants to use that
That would work for
area.
us if that's what you'd like to do.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Dwayne. We did hear you. That area, I just don't know how we want to reference that. You can certainly say as discussed this evening. That's not really
Yeah.
permanent. And there, so what I typically suggest to the commission where we don't have it depicted on the plans that have been submitted is to reference a distance that's shown on the plans. And when I was looking at this, I was thinking, oh, the 50-foot buffer, but then that ends up hitting into the house. And that's not the area that you actually want to treat that way, as far as I'm understanding it this evening anyway. So I don't, if you want to do 25 feet off of the floodplain line that's drawn here, I think that's just something to that nature where you're
Yeah.
referencing a line that's existing on the plans for a condition, Brian. That's all, that's just what I'm trying
Yeah.
to sort of figure out this
Okay.
evening.
And would that work for wording, Rebecca, if we were to say, you know, but basically, as discussed and highlighted this evening's meeting and referenced a portion approximately 25 feet off of the existing floodplain line as shown on the maps presented this evening?
I'm comfortable with that. Is that, does
Okay.
the applicant understand what that is? Because it's obviously not exactly what I had drawn, so I just want to make sure you're still comfortable with that.
Yes,
So 25 foot off the floodplain line on the property.
yes.
Okay. Commission members have thoughts on this? People comfortable with this? Changes, tweaks, difference of opinion?
That makes sense.
Okay. All right. Any members of the public here to comment on this particular project this evening? Again, seeing none. Sorry. All right. In that case, I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for 642 Main Street, map 2, parcel 20. Do I hear a second for closing?
Second,
Second.
All those in favor, starting with Paul,
aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I'm and I myself.
Great, thank you.
All right. I'd like to make a motion that we issue an order of conditions for 642 Main Street, map 2, parcel 20, as presented and discussed at this evening's meeting, with the following conditions: that the erosion control be continued up to the garage on the eastern side of the property, and that the area, as discussed and highlighted in this evening's meeting, approximately 25 feet off the existing floodplain, be limited to once a year mowing. Do I hear a second for that?
Second,
All right, all those in favor, starting with Paul,
aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I'm an I as well.
who had the second? I'm sorry, I was still writing the condition.
I believe it was Paul on that one.
Yes.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you. All right.
All right, well,
All
thank
right.
you very much. We appreciate you working with us on this.
All
Yep.
right, thank you. Guys, take
Thank
care.
you.
How are we on time?
Thank you. You're good. Bye. I'll leave it out.
Rebecca, it looks like we have about 2 minutes. Do we have, no, we got through all of our updates.
The only other update that I had was just that our volunteer land steward position is still open. And we are going to be starting, right now I'm coordinating the answers from the survey, the open space and recreation plan update survey, so that we can, or I will be coordinating a meeting, our first initial meeting, so we can start that process.
Have you gotten any feedback and or interest? I know we've announced the meeting and we're trying to get some people, but has anybody talked to you really offhand that said, I'd be interested in doing this, or?
Yeah, actually,
good.
for the open space and recreation plan subcommittee, I believe we have a list of about 20 people who expressed interest in it, and about 10 of them responded to the outreach email I sent out asking for time and date availability. So it's encouraging. And then myself,
Wow.
the Parks and Rec coordinator, and the town planner, potentially the town administrator here and there, will be sitting on that subcommittee as well. So we have had some interest, and we may get more. I think some individuals will participate on a less regular basis, or maybe with some community outreach components versus the entire way through, which is typical on something like this. But yeah, I was surprised. We also had about 179 as of yesterday responses to the survey. And I did
Okay.
extend that to January 20th, because I will actually be meeting with the Council on Aging, and we'll be bringing some hard copies there on the 19th. So trying to get a little bit more
Very nice.
feedback.
Good. I
Yeah.
filled mine out. Hope all commission
Thank
members,
you.
if you haven't filled out your survey, you have until the 19th. Or anyone watching this evening. That said, I think we're at 7:40. So the Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, to consider a notice of intent for 580 Main Street, DEP file number 112-0719. If I remember correctly, Rebecca, last time we had basically put together what we thought would be our final orders, kind of get our final thoughts out, final questions, all that good stuff to give you a chance to go ahead and draft these orders. I know since then we've received something from MIPA regarding this project. And I'm wondering if you could kind of summarize what they had sent along to us.
Sure. So I was notified about the MIPA review meeting, we'll call it. The applicant was there as well. It's not a requirement that commissions attend, but it is a good practice to be considering their comments as part of the commission's decision or orders of conditions, to just make sure that we're encompassing the state's review as well, and any potential conditions that could come out of that. That being said, I think it was a productive review. The certification letter, or the form that's issued after that, came out on Friday. I just received it from one of their staff about a half hour before this meeting. So the commission has received it. I don't know if they've had time to review it, but it is substantially what we've been discussing. It's the same information. There were a couple items that I was a little concerned about in their comments, or items that could be added as conditions that I did not receive before. In terms of something of concern to me, was that in their comments, they had noted that the south fire pond should no longer be used as a fire pond and allowed to naturalize. this is the area where the applicant has proposed dry hydrant. So that was a little concerning to me, where I wasn't sure if there was any extensive comments beyond that in terms of why they didn't want it used as a fire pond anymore. But where that's part of their fire protection, and I think it's required for the applicant, that's something that is of concern to me in terms of the conditions, because the condition as it stands right now, the draft document has what was discussed previously, and that's the installation of the dry hydrant, the trenching that goes along with it. There was note in the comments also about the parking area that is being revegetated and mitigated in that sense. So the existing parking area that's adjacent to the proposed building 2, to have a native wildflower mix, to revegetate that area, and that's outside of the BLSF. So that they just were noting an area that's being used as mitigation. So you're taking a pervious surface, impervious, making it pervious. Then the other item they highlighted just impacts to ILSF and IBW. They asked the applicant to submit supplemental information to demonstrate the project's compliance with the riverfront area performance standards. They didn't explicitly include what needs to be submitted, to my knowledge, unless Phil has other information from them. And then they just totaled some of the square footage. So for instance, 7,252 square feet of IBW will be permanently altered. 42,851 square feet will be temporary altered in BLSF, but they're providing compensatory flood storage, and they are replicating the IBW within the BLSF area. Then they restated the fact that there's 34,746 square feet of riverfront area being altered on site. 12,035 square feet of that is noted to be temporary. 22,011 square feet is noted to be permanent. So those were some of the key components that I pulled out of that review. I was noted by the staff of the MIPA review process to look specifically at the wetlands, and that's basically where I pulled that from. I did look at the other sections, and it seemed like they were comfortable with the stormwater and some of the other features, that were provided. So that all being said, I don't know if the chair or the commission has any other questions, or if you want to open it up to the applicant, because it is still an open public hearing. I don't believe we closed at the last meeting.
Yeah, can I actually ask you for clarification? The mitigation of the errors that they had mentioned, and we're talking about that mitigation, you said they had suggested a different type of planting, or suggested a certain planting?
So it's a native wildflower was what was in the MIPA review as far as mitigation. This is in the area adjacent to the BLSF area. So it's an area that's existing parking today that they're removing. So in that area, instead of having it be lawn, which the commission, it didn't sound like they were favorable to have it anyway, that's what they're hoping to revegetate with. And they're not, it doesn't sound like they're proposing to put in shrubs or any plantings. That's, again, this is from MIPA review. If
Right.
more information, that's great. But that was the only note about the planting. And then the south fire pond.
Yeah.
And that I don't quite understand, because I thought during the meeting that was clarified in terms of how it was delineated previously and what is being proposed now. So the fact that they still had that comment, I don't know if there was some miscommunication or if they came back and said, no, use the north pond for a fire pond. I don't have any clarification on that at this moment.
Okay.
Can I weigh in on that?
Phil, please go ahead.
Sure. So I don't have anything to add other than to clarify that during the MIPA process, we went over the fire pond in great detail, the existing stormwater pond being converted to a resource area pond and a fire pond. So I think what ultimately materialized in the certificate that Rebecca is quoting from, I think they just mischaracterized it. You know, I know Mia from Mass DP was on the call. I think when MIPA themselves wrote the language, I think they just rewrote it maybe a little sloppily, with no offense intended. It is our intent that that is still a fire pond and resource area. There is no directive from MIPA to suggest otherwise, no directive from DEP to suggest that it's otherwise as well, just so you know.
Okay, I appreciate that. I appreciate that, and I'm sure that's what happened. But in relaying what that letter says, it is very black and white, and them saying that is not to be used as a fire pond, which is a very weird, unfortunate thing. I will say though, MIPA said that it did not require further review through their process. So that is encouraging in terms of them meeting the required standards.
And I would suggest to that in their statement of no further review required, I would infer that the power lies with this commission to determine what the ultimate result of that pond is, quite frankly. You're the purveyors of the Wetlands Protection Act in this case. So you get the ultimate decision.
It kind of leads into my next question, because and this is kind of a Rebecca question. Talked about MIPA had asked them to submit certain information that basically showing that you meet the riverfront standards. Is that how I was hearing, Rebecca? And again, I apologize. I haven't had a chance to review this at all. I haven't even looked at it.
Yeah, so
we
there
just got it
was
today.
There was a line that said, or one of the comments rather under the wetlands was the applicant to supply a notice of intent supplement to demonstrate the project's compliance with the riverfront area performance standards. So that's not a submittal to MIPA, that's a submittal to the commission is what they're
Right.
suggesting.
Do we have that?
I have not gotten any new information since that correspondence or since Friday when this was apparently issued.
And Mr. Chair, there is no new information on the application, so I would,
Okay.
I
Could
would
we-
go on.
Could we get that?
I guess,
I
so
think what they were referring to, and Phil,
Go
just
ahead.
before you
Yep, go ahead.
Please. Yeah.
go down a rabbit hole here.
Yeah. Sorry.
I think what they were referring to is I had mentioned some comments from one of the commission's public hearings previously, where the commission had asked the total riverfront area on the site and therefore classifying it. And Phil had answered, and I think that's why they were mentioning the square footage of each of the resource area, because it developed into that answer in terms of going through and saying, this is the square footage of what's going to be altered.
Yeah.
And I believe Phil had either provided or was going to provide the total square footage of riverfront area on site. So that I believe was what they were referring to, because I don't recall requesting other information.
Correct.
But
So I would add to that as well. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chairman.
No, go ahead, go ahead,
That's my reading of it as well, because that was really the only outstanding bit of information. And I'd actually clarify to your agent's comment. We talked about it at the last meeting. She had asked what the numbers were. I wasn't in a position to have it, but I redirected that it was contained within the original application report. So we were not intending to submit any additional information, quite frankly, because it is all contained within there. And we haven't changed it at this point.
And I do remember this discussion from last time. I was like, oh, that's right. We did actually, go through this. Those are some of the initial questions I had. Any commission members have any questions or comments based on that summation of the MIPA findings? And I should ask quick, any members of the public here tonight to comment on this particular project? And again, seeing none. I guess the only thing that kind of really, I guess my other question, I'm sorry for you, Phil, was mitigation of that area that we just discussed, where they're saying to use a native wildflower mix, was there anything proposed for that area?
There was. So let me, if I may, Mr. Chair, let me just share my screen very
Please,
quickly.
Rebecca, if you could, thank you.
And just confirm when you have that. I've zoomed in on it. This
Okay.
is the landscape plan that was
Wildflowers.
submitted. You have it.
Yep.
So I'm just zooming right in on that note. It is a wildflower mix. That's what we were proposing. So they are essentially affirming that.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that we need to add to that, which we can, is it needs to be a native wildflower mix or a native cultivar mix, but it has to be a native species. No invasives, no random wildflowers.
That's
but we
fine.
can-
But you, Mr. Chair, you just said no cultivars. So you
I'm
don't.
not cultivars. I'm sorry. God, I'm sorry. Words are escaping me tonight. Pollinators, native pollinators, native wildflowers, anything but native, I guess, is the key word that's missing on that one. That's
so-
easily.
Right, so
added.
should you be willing to entertain it? That would be, great verbiage for a condition to reinforce this plan, and that's certainly fine by us.
And I'm sure you guys are amenable to that. I shouldn't say I'm sure, but I'm assuming you're amenable to, okay.
We are. You are sure, and you are correct.
All right, good. I guess the only really outstanding thing for me, and I'll turn it over to commission members too, is that fire pond question. It's a tough one. Like if Meeple was so black and white on that, it kind of scares me, but I can kind of see where that could have been an oversight. I know it is necessary. There's no way we need to have some sort of fire security there. And I don't know where else that could possibly happen. I think I was gonna say, I'm just saying more to other commission members, having heard this whole discussion so far, I think I'm comfortable moving forward with it, how it's been drawn out. But if other commission members want to take time to either talk to MIPA or kind of read through everything more, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
And could I add one thing before you open it to the
Please,
commission,
Phil, go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair? Just again, for clarification, the applicant does not need that pond as part of our fire management. We will have our own storage tanks.
Okay.
That pond is for the Bolton Fire Department now, or going forward, it will be only for the Bolton Fire Department for regional firefighting. So just to clarify the usage, it is not by us, it's by the town.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification, Phil.
Yeah.
My question and concern is still equivalent to what it was, but I do appreciate, because that's helpful to know in terms of the impacts to your project.
It's very helpful to note, honestly, Rebecca, for me, I'm wondering what are the chances if we talk to the fire department and kind of explain that there's environmental concerns with that particular fire pond, if they'd be willing to check for a different location or to maybe see if they can let that one go. I think it would just save you time and hassle having to try to put in that whole dry hydrant, hopefully save you money on that one. And honestly, it's probably better that it's not there. But that would be a conversation with, fire protection. I want to make sure they're covered. I just don't know if you think that's possible or something they would consider. Sorry,
So
Rebecca.
from our side, on the applicant side, my conversations with the chief about the need for the fire pond were pretty clear. Certainly, if the commission feels otherwise, I'm not going to speak on the chief's behalf. My only 2 cents that I would suggest this evening is, our interests, obviously at this point, I'll be quite candid. We would love to be able to close this process and leave it open and move on, because we do have some additional steps to go through, obviously with Mass DEP and the Army Corps of Engineer, et cetera.
Yeah.
So should you want to have those conversations, maybe we could wordsmith a great condition that can cover you to that.
Well, here's, I guess, the question, Phil. I don't know that we would, I think we can have those conversations with the chief. But if it wasn't the conditions that you have to put in the fire pond, and we approved it and that was in the conditions, and a week from now we came back and said, you know what, you don't have to put it in. My guess is you wouldn't be fighting to go through with that, and we could possibly do an amendment. We might ask you to come back and ask for an amendment. But I guess I think, the coming back and asking us for an amendment is probably cheaper than putting it in. So Rebecca, does that make sense that, if we went forward with that condition in there and in the interim heard something from the chief where they were willing to not put a fire pond there?
I would suggest to the commission, just because I'm always hesitant to include conditions in an order of conditions and set a precedence to then say, oh no, you don't actually have to do them. And it has nothing to do with this project explicitly, but any potential future projects. And that would be my concern. But I do think the commission has the ability to potentially close and then issue at the next meeting, because that is a process the commission has used in the past. In the meantime, I can seek clarification from MIPA. The commission wouldn't be discussing anything or considering any new information. It's just clarification of the existing. And essentially 2 things would happen. The first would be I'd reach out to the staff from MIPA who sent me the letter and ask clarification on that particular item. Specifically, what is the environmental concern of that, and where did that stem from, or was that a miscommunication? Because that is a very drastic miscommunication if that is the case, which I feel it may be. I agree with Phil. I was present during the discussion. It doesn't make sense unless something happened outside of that. The second, if there is, in fact, if they come back and say, no, that's what it is, and there is a significant concern, then I can certainly follow up with the chief prior to the next meeting and ask. And then I can basically pull that from the order of conditions before it's issued in the draft document, and where it's issued at the next meeting, the commission can pull it out, put it in, type of thing. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense to me. Does it make sense to commission members?
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion.
All right. And Phil, would you understand, we would close the public hearing tonight and then probably vote to issue it in 2 weeks?
Yeah, that's fine. Forward progress is what we're looking for.
And that
So
kind of puts
we-
us on the clock too, once we close, yeah.
Correct. So
Um,
you'd have 21 days, obviously, from once you vote. So maybe we can have some discussion on conditions tonight, and at the next meeting, we'll bow tie everything. And have
Right.
your chance to talk to everybody and choose to do what you
All
choose
right.
to do.
Because like that said, I'm going to open to commission members too. The only condition I would ask Rebecca to add is about the native wildflower mix. Just making sure that it is a native planting. Other than that, I wouldn't have any changes to how it stands right now. Other commission members have thoughts, feelings, and I'd love to get your comments on it too, Rebecca.
Can I just ask one follow-up to the native mix? So there is a draft condition talking about native plantings. The commission is comfortable. My question is the commission comfortable with the existing landscaping plan? And if so, that can be referenced in the order.
That's fine, as long as it is
Okay.
written in there, I'm more than comfortable with that.
Okay, so you're comfortable with the existing landscaping plan?
Yeah, it's just on
Okay.
the map we had seen it, it didn't mention it, but if it's written into the plan, then I'm comfortable.
Yeah, so I'm just to clarify, the conditions there about the native vegetation, I'm just seeking clarification on that. The commission accepts the landscaping plan, knowing that that condition's already in the order that's drafted. The landscaping plan is something that the applicant has submitted for the entirety of the site.
Gotcha.
So as long as you're comfortable with me referencing that in addition to the condition, I think that's fine.
Okay, I'm fine with it that
Okay.
way. And I think you're right. I think that's covered. One supersedes the other anyways. Right. Other commission members have any additional comments, conditions, or questions on anything we just discussed? Say, Jim, did,
No, all set. No, all set.
Okay.
Thank
any members of the public here tonight to comment on this particular project? Seeing none. All right. In that case, I'd like to make a motion. Oh, excuse me one second. Get my DEP file number straight. I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for 580 Main Street DEP file number 112-0719. Do I hear a second for closing?
Second,
All right, all those in favor, starting with Paul,
Aye.
Jim,
aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an aye as well. And I don't think the commission is going to take action on this particular notice at this time. It has been closed. We'll most likely vote on it at our next meeting.
What is the next meeting, Mr. Chair?
I'm sorry, it's the 24th.
Okay. And just final question, and I'll step out of your way for this evening.
Go ahead.
Will we be able to review a draft of the order prior to that meeting, just so we're informed when we attend? I don't know that we've seen one yet.
Rebecca, if it's allowed or possible, I'm okay if you share a draft with that, but just know that seeing how if you see something in the draft and you're like, I really want this changed, like we've basically closed the discussion. We'll probably leave you on mute, like when we bring it up and vote on it, unless we have an additional question. But just so you understand that, like, it is officially closed at this point, but I'm happy if Rebecca is comfortable sharing a draft with you so you can see it a little in advance. I think that's fine.
Yeah, I'm certainly happy to do that, Brian, and I appreciate you noting that as well, that the commission can certainly pull in or take out or put in or take out various conditions or rework at the next meeting. But yeah, it's closed to the public and the applicants as well. But yes, I can certainly, what I'm going to do is add in the couple things from this evening, and then I can certainly send that to the commission and to the applicant.
Great.
Phil, should I be copying anyone else on that?
No, you could
From your
send
team?
it to me, Rebecca, and I'll make sure it gets to everybody on the team. We're all
Okay.
together. Thank you.
Great. Mhm.
Okay.
All right.
Have a good evening.
All right, take care, Phil. All right. Rebecca, let me know when you are ready to continue. I think yeah.
I'm ready. I'm just making a note, so
I
Definitely send
wanted to
it.
give you a chance to jot down anything you need to after that one.
Yeah.
Okay. And Whitcomb Road is actually a new hearing, correct?
that is correct.
All right.
And
So
we do have the applicant's representative present as well.
okay, so I'd like to open the public hearing under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider a notice of intent for 19 Whitcomb Road, DEP file number 112-0723, septic replacement and garage installation. And if the applicant's representative is here tonight, could you give us a quick summation of the project?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, my name is Greg Roy with Dillis and Roy. Appreciate your time this evening. Happy New Year to everybody. And Mitch Dutcher, I think, is on the call.
Yep.
There he is. Hey, Mitch. So I'll give you a quick presentation. Would it be appropriate to share my screen?
It would be, Rebecca, if you could allow Greg to do that.
Greg, you should have access to do that.
Okay. Bear with me here. Okay, can you see that screen, the plan? One second here. Okay.
Yes, we can see it, Greg.
Okay, everybody can see that. Okay, great. So the applicant, again, as you stated, is Mitch Dutcher. The property is 19 Whitcomb. The existing house was built nominally 10 years ago with a well and septic system. Mitch approached us a few months back, is interested in building a garage structure in the back corner of the property. which is located within the outer limits of the buffer zone. I'll go over that in a second. But I just want to give you an overview of the site. So just, it's a little bit difficult to see here, but Whitcomb Road is actually over in this part of the site here. And Sugar Road is down on the bottom of the page, orientated on the plan view. The lot actually has frontage on Sugar Road. That's where it derives its legal frontage, but there's an access easement for the driveway that comes in through the abutting property, the Damon property. I'm not sure the address, but so that's why it has the address off of Whitcomb Road, just for everybody's benefit. So if you were to take Whitcomb Road, you would pass a house on the right, and then the driveway would be the second right as you go into Whitcomb Road, just for your, if you can visualize that. So the applicant, I'm going to zoom in here. The applicant is proposing to construct a garage building on the property with an associated driveway access in this location here. The proposed structure would actually be over where the existing septic system is. So this project will necessitate the construction of a new septic system. We'll have to relocate the leaching field for that to accommodate that construction. The location of the barn, as shown on this plan, required a variance, a dimensional variance, and the applicant has already secured that variance through the Zoning Board of Appeals. So that process is done. As I mentioned, we also need a Board of Health, a sewage disposal system construction permit, and that application is also pending before the Board of Health. So we have done some additional soil testing that was, we did that back in late summer to facilitate the relocation of the system, pardon me. And that application is before the Board of Health currently. So there's two resource areas in play here that have impact on the property. If you can picture driving down this location of Sugar Road, there's a perennial stream that exists across the frontage of this property. So there's an associated riverfront area, and that is located, I don't have my highlighter here, but it's this large dashed dot line here that comes across. You can see here I have limit of 200-foot outer riparian zone. All of the work that we're proposing for this new project is located outside the riverfront area. So although we have riverfront area on the site, we are not proposing any work within the riverfront area. I just wanted to note for your reference that we do have riverfront area on the property. So there's a wetland system, some of which exists adjacent to the stream, and then some exist off-site. And you can see these wetland flags here, wetland flag A17 through A23. It's wetland flags A21 and 22 that are really the subject of really what caused the buffer zone to overlap the proposed work area. So the limit of the closest point of the barn, I believe, is about 75 feet from the wetland area. We would, of course, be proposing an erosion control barrier, which is shown in this heavy dashed line
No,
here.
that's not us. Okay.
Heavy dash line here. And then a very small amount of the breakout grading from the new septic system between the erosion control barrier and the limit of the buffer zone would also be within the in the buffer zone area, but none of the leaching area components, leaching system components would be within the buffer zone. So all of the leaching trenches, both for the primary and the reserve area, would be located outside of the 100-foot buffer zone. That's a general summary. We did receive the DEP file number for this project. It's 112-0723, and we did not get any comments from DEP relative to that file number. So I wanted to leave it at that, I think, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions that you folks have or any questions that the public may have.
Sure. I can start with this. Could you kind of, I know you can't highlight on your map. Can you point out with your cursor on the map where the existing septic is right now?
Yeah, I can highlight it. Hold on one second. Let me just switch over to markup mode here and get a highlighter. Okay. The existing septic system is 2 trenches, Brian, and they're right here, right in there.
Gotcha.
So that's those are the existing leaching field. You can see that that's, you know, would be within the footprint of where the proposed garage structure is going.
Yeah.
So,
And you're basically rotating it, putting it, okay.
yeah, exactly.
right.
So the new leaching field is right in here like that.
I'm going to turn it over to commission members in a second. I'm not overly familiar with this property, and usually with something like this, especially, and I appreciate that you're outside the riverfront area. It's something that we would do a site visit on, just to take a look. And I know we have, say, to mark certain things out, but for me, like if you could kind of do the corners of the barn, basically where the barn is, it looks like you flagged the wetlands.
Yep.
I think that would be, and then, you know, if you could, well, we can see where the buffer zone kind of cuts through it. But basically to flag out where that barn is going to be, I can see where the wetland markers are. I guess those would be the big ones I'd kind of want to look at out in the field. But that's all for me initially. I'll turn it over to commission members. Any commission members have questions, comments, thoughts regarding this project? Hearing no additional. Rebecca, do you have any initial thoughts, comments on this particular project?
I would echo a site visit would be helpful, but also reminding about our bylaw regulations under the 75-foot adjacent upland resource area, which follows what the 100-foot area is highlighting, 100-foot buffer area is highlighting, and just understanding the commission's tasked with minimizing or mitigating if or not impacting that area, just to be general. So when I'm looking at this site, again, a site visit will provide much more clarity on it, but I'm also looking at other areas on the site that aren't currently disturbed, that are outside of the jurisdictional area of the commission that might be able to serve a similar purpose. And that's keeping in mind, I see the well radius, so I understand that is potentially an implication as well. So that's sort of what I'm looking at and trying to see along with the location that's proposed. Is there another location that will meet the goals on site or will meet the goals of the applicant? It may not be their first or the perfect location, but it still meets the same goals and purpose of what that area is to be used for and the structure to be built.
Thank you. And can I ask quickly, Greg, what's the approximate square footage, do you know offhand, of the barn area that's inside the buffer zone, inside the 100-foot?
Oh, boy, I can get that for,
Okay, I was gonna say, if
yeah,
if we do schedule a site visit, if
I
you're
can
there,
have
if
it
somebody's
for you.
there, if they have that info at the site visit, that would be perfect. And we can reference it at next meeting.
Yep. Absolutely, I can have that for you.
All right. Already asked commission members, any members of the public here tonight to comment on this particular project or hearing?
Yeah, this is Alison Morgan. I'm an abutting neighbor. I'm just interested in understanding a little bit more about what the proposed erosion control barrier means, because I'm very aware of the stream that was mentioned and just wanted to know what that was, because the stream certainly flooded in the pre-Christmas rain we had.
Yeah.
Greg,
all
would you
of
be
a sudden-
comfortable going through what you'd be using for erosion control?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all of a sudden we switched from a drought condition in the summer to a rainy condition in late November, December. So I get that. Let's see if I have a detail here. Do I have? I guess it's on the. Oh no, it's down here. So we would be doing a treatment of hay bales and a what's called what's called a silt fence. Which if you if you drive along in the road in certain construction sites, you might recall seeing some black fence, which is staked every approximately 4 feet or so. It sits about 2 feet or 30 inches above the ground. So we would be putting two rows of erosion control protection along that barrier. There would be the silt fence that would be, it's a woven mesh type of fence that's actually towed into the ground. So you actually excavate a small trench and actually backfill the bottom 6 inches of the fence into the ground. It sticks up about 2.5 feet. And then adjacent to that, we also put a line of hay bales or straw bales that are also staked in place with wooden stakes. So that's a pretty conventional way of mitigating runoff and keeping any erosion from happening, from translating off the property. So again, we'd be proposing that type of treatment along this, see if I can highlight here, along this heavy dash line right here, which in addition to providing the erosion control will also function as a limit of work for the project. So it sort of defines it does two things. It controls the erosion, but it also functions as a limit of work on the site.
And to clarify as well, on projects that are permitted, this one's obviously in the process of review right now. Projects that are permitted, the limit of work is defined by the erosion control barrier, as Greg just stated, but that's temporary during construction until that area is stabilized. It's not there permanent.
Right. We typically have a condition, I think Bolton's boilerplate orders of conditions include a condition that once the site's stabilized and a final inspection is done by the Conservation Commission or its agent, that silt fence barrier has to be removed prior to final sign off. So it wouldn't be something we'd be keeping in place only while the site is until we get vegetation and stabilized soils.
I can quickly add to that too, that generally speaking, if we do issue an order of conditions, usual condition that erosion control needs to be in place and approved by the conservation agent before any work can start.
Yeah. So it's sort of the first thing that's installed and the last thing that's removed.
Does that answer your question? I hope.
Yes, thanks for clarifying. Appreciate it.
All right. And any additional questions? Any other members of the public here tonight have questions or comments? All right. Seeing none. Greg, with your permission, would probably like to continue this to our next meeting for the purposes of setting up a site visit and getting out there. Would that be fine with you if we were to continue?
Yeah, I think it's in your prerogative to do
All right.
that. I sort of expected that you'd want to go out on a site visit.
Well,
so
technically, we need your permission as the applicant.
Yeah,
to,
no, I get that.
Okay.
So,
All right.
yeah.
So
doesn't sound like you're ready to vote on it tonight. So
no, I was gonna say it'd be kind of difficult, but after saying it.
I don't think asking you to vote tonight would be that productive. So
Well, I think you know the vote you might get.
we're happy to vote. We're happy to
Okay.
grant a 2-week continuance, and I assume we'd be trying to schedule a site walk in the interim.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And we'll usually coordinate that offline. I know Rebecca will usually send around to us probably tomorrow or the next day, inquiring as dates and times to make it what will work for everyone.
You would like me to have the corners of the barn staked for that site walk and then have a good handle on the ground where the buffer zone is?
If possible, yeah, and just make sure we can kind of see. It looks like I'm sure you already flagged it because I know you had the you had the A's, you had the numbers on there. As long as those are still up and we can see
They're
those.
a little hard to. It's pretty thick, I think, down
to get in there.
But what we can do is I think it might be even more productive. Just we'll flag the limits of the buffer zone.
The buffer zone, that would work. That would be excellent as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll throw a couple stakes or a few flags there, so just so you can have reference and know where you're standing on the plan.
All right.
Relative to the plan.
Can I ask Rebecca, what's our first opening on the 24th?
7:20 on the 24th.
All right. In that case, second. I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for 19 Whitcomb Road, DEP file number 112-0723 until our next public hearing, Tuesday, January 24th at 7:20 PM. Do I hear a second for continuing?
Second.
All those in favor, starting with Paul,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I'm an aye as well.
Wonderful, thank you. Greg, if you could stop sharing your screen, that
Oh,
would be.
yeah, sorry
great.
about that.
That's okay,
If I
thanks.
can, how do I get that? I've lost my,
I kicked you off. Apparently I can kick you off.
oh, okay, good. You're
Nice.
good. You're all set. I lost my stop share button. So thank you very much. I guess, Rebecca, you'll be in touch to schedule the site visit and, get things staked on the ground, and, we'll look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. All right, Rebecca, you ready to continue?
Yes.
Okay. In that case, the Bolton Conservation Commission will now have a public hearing the Bolton Conservation Commission will now conduct a public hearing under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, and the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, to discuss a request for determination of applicability for 707/709 Main Street. Proposed removal, inclusive of stump grinding of one white pine, one apple tree, and several scrub maples. Rebecca, is the applicant or a representative for the applicant here this evening?
Yes, they are. If you would like them to provide a summary of their project.
That would be excellent if they are willing.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Jake Ashatino, thanks for having me. So I have some stuff I can share. It's snapshots, kind of aerial views and pictures of where these trees are. So I'll share my screen just briefly if you'll allow it.
That would be excellent, Rebecca.
Okay, so this first one is just a snapshot of the GIS map of the property. Okay, and this is just meant to be an aerial view of the whole plot and kind of where the trees are. So this is 117 Main Street. Here's the property right here. And the trees are actually right along this edge of the property that I share with my neighbor who's also on the call. And I believe has talked to the commission a couple of times. Him and I have been working together on discussing the removal of these trees. They're on my side of the property line, but we've been working together to kind of even future plans, talk about what we would replace those with, that kind of thing. So like the application said, there is actually one large pine, and you'll see it in a picture I'll show in a second. And then the scrub pines that we referred to, they're kind of underneath the large pine, and you'll see in the picture they're pretty unhealthy looking, but they're very small. And then the last tree is right here in basically the corner. So that's what it refers to, that stump grinding piece. So let me pull up the other picture so we can see, and then I'll pause. Okay, and then here's a picture. This is just right off of Google Maps, but this picture shows from the street looking into the property, and these are the trees right here, lining that side of the property. So the only green one in the picture is the large pine that we referred to, and then the back of these are the scrub pines that get referred to, and the apple tree right here closest to the street is the last one. Okay, so there's a small indent right here on the property line that kind of curves in, and we saw that on the GIS map. That's all of these trees are right up to that indent, and then there's about 30 more feet until a culverted section of the stream that runs behind my neighbor's property. Once it gets to my property line, it's no longer culverted. It's open to the air. But these are about 30 feet before that stream, and on the GIS map and in the property itself. So that's the project. We just want to remove these, stump grind them, and then in the spring we've already been talking about kind of just replacing them with something that equates to privacy hedges, trees, something that fits in this area that would be acceptable.
Okay.
And I'll stop sharing my screen, but I can share anything else again if we need it.
No, I think that a pretty good explanation. I'll open up to other commission members. I'd love to hear Rebecca's thoughts. I think it would be fine. Again, I'd like to hear Rebecca's thoughts, but I think we might want to add something in as to what would be replanted, what that mitigation is going to be, some exact wording in the actual order saying that it's going to get replanted with either privacy hedges or X or Y.
Right.
That's my initial thoughts after hearing what you had to say. I'm curious if other commission members have initial comments, questions, or thoughts. And not hearing any right now. Rebecca, I'd love to get your thoughts or comments on this particular project.
That would be my comment, Brian, is exactly what you already expressed. I think it would be helpful regarding the tree removal, because as I'm sure this site is the case, as much of the sites along Main Street there are entirely within riverfront area, entirely within, actually, I'm not sure with this property, but most along there are also entirely within 100-foot buffer adjacent upland resource area. So keeping in mind all of those performance standards, I can certainly see trees that are dead and no rate of survival being removed. I don't think that's a concern of mine. But the removal of the large pine or anything that is viable within a resource area, I guess that would just be, I would like to understand what the purpose is. And the reason why is because the fact that something's there needs to be removed within jurisdictional area, the commission has to consider those performance standards. And as you may have heard, if you sat on the meeting a little bit more, those performance standards need to be met. I appreciate that you're proposing to revegetate with something else, and I think that's helpful for the commission to note, but I would echo that what Brian already said, and you've heard the preference for the native vegetation. So I think native vegetation is important in any sort of remediation that you're proposing, but it would be very important for the commission to be explicitly putting that in any sort of conditions. It doesn't sound like they're leaning towards requiring a notice of intent of you for this particular works. But I think also, can you clarify for the commission whether you will be requiring stump grinding or if you were just leaving the stumps?
Well, our just desire to replace was where the stump grinding came in. So it's just to make room for whatever else we would put in there. And we did target a couple of things we were thinking of replacing with, but I wanted to be sensitive to kind of the considerations, Rebecca, you mentioned, reading up on Bolton bylaws and just kind of considering it logically, putting something that's native and makes sense for that spot. So stump grinding is only to make room for something else, and the something else we're pretty open to, as neighbors. We just care that it restores whatever privacy was there from the trees, and it makes sense.
Sure, thank you. The other question I had was how close, so I can obviously see the large pine in the image, I can see the apple tree in the image that's closer to the roadway. Regarding any of the smaller scrub pines, are any of those on the bank itself or like within 5 feet of the bank?
No, of the water, you mean, right?
Of the brook, of the river.
Yeah, I would say the last tree that's closest to the bank is still probably 20-25 feet away from it.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
Okay, those are just my questions, Brian.
Can I ask about how many trees total? I know it's the 2, and then it was several of the more of the scrub trees. Is it like 5 or 6 total? Are we looking at something like that?
I think in total, so the apple tree that's closest to the road, the large pine, so that's 2, and then the scrub trees, there's probably 4 in there underneath that pine. So and they're maybe 4 feet tall, maybe 2 inches in diameter at the biggest.
All right, again, I'll open it up to other commission members too. As Rebecca stated, I don't think you need a full-on NOI for this. Normally, we do require it within those riverfront areas, but we have made some exceptions in the past for these particular properties that are kind of hemmed in right there. We kind of know the history of them, where they stand, all of that. So in the past, we haven't always required it. I can see us doing this with an RDA this time, but again, that's one opinion. I'll hear from the rest of the commission first. I would think, as we said, that we could probably allow it as proposed with while including the condition that it gets replanted with, and that's kind of why I was asking how many trees, something along the lines that it gets replanted with no less than 5 or no less than 6 native trees or hedges. Would that make sense? Would wording like that kind of make sense for us, Rebecca?
Can I suggest something, Brian?
Please.
What I would say, if you want to specify a type of vegetation like trees, that's completely fine at the discretion, of the commission. What I would suggest for conditions is, if the commission is going to be allowing stump grinding, that's fine. So just making sure that the removal is inclusive of that in the 6 total referencing. That's referenced that there's nothing to be removed within 20 feet of the bank. And then in addition to that, that the remediation plantings be native vegetation at a rate of 2 to 1. Because essentially what you're doing is, Brian, when you're talking about the allowing for something, it's still mitigation and providing the performance standards that are required within that area, because they're not increasing any impervious surface. They're not negatively, or the commission has to establish that they're not negatively or adversely impacting the resource area. Or if they're doing so temporarily, they're remediating that, which that's what that 2 to 1 would allow for. And it also allows for it to be done with native vegetation. So you're actually improving upon potentially that area.
Brian and Rebecca, this is Craig
Go ahead.
Bover. I'm the abutter. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes.
5 or 6 trees in that zone, it's like a jungle in there now, and we're trying to open it up and let the property breathe. I think 5 or 6 trees would really overwhelm it. And what Jacob and I have been looking at are trees that are not like a maple tree that's going to grow 80 feet.
Right.
We've looked at one prime tree is a Japanese Stewarthia, which has got a really interesting bark.
Yeah, I'll stop you right there, Craig. Like any of those Japanese maples, any of those decorative trees are non-native and are not allowed. There's no, I shouldn't say no.
All right,
it'll go to the commission, but it's nothing we've ever allowed.
We
within
look
those
for
buffer
input
zones.
then on what would be acceptable, but I just
Right.
think to specify that we're going to have 5 or 6 trees, I think it would just overwhelm the site.
I could see that, but I'm trying to think, Rebecca, with the 2 to 1 vegetation, would it allow for more of a native shrub or smaller trees?
So that's why I was noting, if the commission is establishing the condition in the determination as the remediation or the planting rate is going to be at 2 to 1 of native or New England native or Massachusetts native vegetation that allows for the applicant to, if they want to use shrubs, they can use shrubs. If they want to use trees, they can use trees. If you want to specify it that way, I think that's helpful to say shrubs or trees, just to basically alleviate the area to be retained as lawn, unless the commission's comfortable with that, because the area adjacent to it is lawn.
Yeah.
But that's just something to note. So I think highlighting, again, 2 to 1 ratio, the native vegetation, native tree or shrub. I think that would serve the performance standard, and that would also meet the needs of the applicant, it sounds, and give them the ability to look through these vegetation,
Yeah.
the shrubs or trees, and then choose something that they aesthetically enjoy as well.
So I would say, Craig, would that make sense to you where, it can be a mix of the two? So you're not necessarily putting in 6 additional, maybe you're putting in 3 trees and then 4 shrubs in between or something along those lines. So we hit that performance standard, but you have some leeway as to what you can choose to put in there, how big it's going to get, how much
Right.
space it's going to be taking.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that's exactly what Jacob and I have discussed. And, the reality is, if you look at that, if you look at the trees we're talking about, there's the apple tree that's there and there's the pine tree. And everything else is literally weeds. I mean, they're sprouted weeds that have come up in the understory that are choked out by really the pine.
I totally get it, but don't forget, we generally protect weeds in the buffer zone areas. They're really actually very useful for a lot of insects, birds, bugs, everything we have around here. So, but I get it. It's not nice for a lawn in between the two. I can understand, wanting to have more of a row of native plantings going down there, but don't be knocking weeds around here.
Got it.
And quick question.
Go ahead.
Hermes. Is there any reference or material I can hold as the standard for kind of Massachusetts native, New England native? I mean, I'm sure I can get that information pretty easily. I just wanted to make sure if there's something I should specifically be referencing that I do that.
Can
I'll
reach
let
out
Rebecca
to-
answer this because usually there's a few good websites she can recommend, but go ahead.
We can't recommend a particular vendor, but I can say there are vendors in Massachusetts that have native seed mix and native shrubs and trees and relative plantings. That is what they are known for. But what I will say is you may want to reach out to the Native Plant Trust or review their website, because they're just a good resource to be looking on if for native species specifically. You can also visit their property if you want to look at some of the species as well. But they're specific to native. They're almost set up like a horticultural society would be, but they're again specific to Massachusetts and native species.
Okay, great.
I was to say, I believe it's their website, Rebecca. I know I've used it for our own yard, where it's really not, you can kind of show them your zone, your region, where you are, and they have the entire listing of, what are you looking for? Shrubs, you're looking for flowers, looking for trees, and they'll kind of give a whole listing. They have pictures of what they end up looking like when they're mature. It's a really nice site.
Yeah, I'm not sure that they sell, the reason I'm comfortable noting that website is
they
I
don't
don't
sell,
believe
right,
that they sell the species there, but they
Yep.
may have a resource list of where you might be able to find them.
Okay. And sorry, you said it was the native, I didn't get the second part.
The Native Plant Trust.
Plant Trust. Okay,
Yeah,
got it.
also used to be known as the New England Wildflower Society, but they changed their name recently to the Native Plant Trust.
Okay, got it.
And I believe they're out of Framingham.
Okay, awesome. So pretty local. Great. Okay, so this all makes complete sense to me. Is there anything else I would owe this team to kind of start moving forward on the removal and stump grinding?
Well, the commission has to make a decision if they have enough information to make a decision, but Brian, I guess the question translated slightly is, do you feel the commission has enough information, or does the commission have additional questions or need for other information?
I'll put that out to other commission members, but I'm comfortable with what you're proposing, and I think we can condition it. But curious if, first of all, if other commission members have comments, questions, or thoughts.
I'm comfortable with that approach.
Okay. And then the other question would be, are there any members of the public here tonight to comment on this particular project? I'm not seeing any. Okay. All right. In that case, well, before I make a motion to close it, basically, Jacob, if we're able to close tonight and kind of agree on an RDA, I believe is it a 10-day period, Rebecca? Once we issue it, that there's a 10-day appeal period that members of the public can appeal it before you can begin, but then after that 10 days, you're basically good to go.
That is correct. Yep.
Okay. All right. So in that case, grab my notes real quick. I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for 707/709 Main Street. Do I hear a second for closing?
Second.
All those in favor, starting with Paul,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I'm an aye as well.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion that we issue a -3 determination for the request for determination of applicability for 707/709 Main Street with the following additional conditions. That no tree removal be done within 25 foot of the bank of the existing perennial stream. And that the trees removed be replaced by native vegetation at a rate of approximately at a rate of 2 to 1. And that vegetation can be made up of a mixture of trees and or shrubs. Do I hear a second for all of that?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, starting with Paul,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I'm an aye as well. All right. So Jacob, you should be all set. Rebecca will probably tell you she's going to bug us in the next couple of days to come to town hall and get everything signed. And then she can either mail you a copy or you could possibly stop in and pick it up depending.
Okay, great.
All right.
Yeah. Rebecca, just let me know. I'm happy to stop by, and thanks again, everybody, for having me and making the process easy.
Oh, thanks. And
Thank
good luck. It's a beautiful house and a nice little area. Hopefully a greatly improving area in the next couple of years too. So we'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, excited. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
All right. Rebecca, are you ready to continue? All right. Excuse me. So the Bolton Conservation Commission will now open a public hearing under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider a notice of intent for 727 Main Street, map 1, parcel 34, DEP file number 112-0722, the proposed replacement of a septic system. Rebecca, is the applicant or a representative for the applicant here this evening?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
I just tried to unmute them.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Nope. I can now.
Matt, are you representing Robin?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right.
So,
Matt, yeah, I was gonna say, if you can give us a quick summary, that would be fantastic.
okay, well, do I have permission to share my screen?
You absolutely do. Rebecca, could you possibly, allow Matt to share his screen, please?
Yep, he should be all set.
Okay.
Thank you. Can everybody see that okay?
I can, yes.
Okay. So first of all, I want to let you know, forgive me for not turning my camera on. I'm actually parked in a parking lot. Just came out of another hearing, so I'm using my laptop and my portable hotspot here. So here we go. So what we have is we have a single family home at 727 Main Street. 727 Main Street is a 0.6 acre lot. About half of the lot is developed. The remaining half is actually a wetland with a perennial stream that goes through it. Considering the last hearing you guys had, it's obvious that that stream goes through that whole strip. So what we have is we have a replacement that was, this proposed septic system was approved by the Board of Health this evening at their meeting. I was notified of that by Evan Carloni of Innovative Septic Design, who designed the system and does the Board of Health end of it. So essentially what we have is we have the 100-foot buffer zone, as I'm outlining with my hand. your 75-foot adjacent upland resource area, 50 feet to the actual wetland, and then the wetland itself that I demarcated on the property. It borders a perennial stream. The perennial stream itself is actually part of a floodway system, but there's no floodplain on the property itself. So the proposal is to replace the existing septic system, which essentially is right here. It's a very antiquated system. It's a complete and total failure under Title V. It is proposed to be replaced with a geomat system, which is, we've used them quite successfully all over this region. They are designed to create as minimal grading as possible and be as effective with nitrogen removal as possible. So the proposal calls for a new well to be installed in the front. You have the house, you have the driveway access right here. A pre-existing garage is here. You have a tree that will have to be removed here, and possibly this tree that would have to be removed here as well. There would be no other canopy proposed to be removed. The wetland on the interior here is a forested wetland. I mean, that's basically it. You have, it's the entirety of the lot is within the riverfront. This is within the inner riparian zone. However, as you can see by the constraints of the lot, it being a narrow lot, half the lot being wetlands, existing structures on it, there's really very limited alternatives as to where you could, actually, there's no other alternatives to where you can put it based on the perk testing. We are looking at doing a minimum 8-inch straw wattle here as outlined under what's known as box number 8, where my hand is, and has plan view notes here that usually help with deciphering what is what on the plans. This in the riverfront takes up about, it's a 3.8% alteration of the total riverfront. I mean, that's basically it. And I'm open for questions or anything else.
All right. Once again, we can, or at least I can appreciate the size of the property and the location of the property you're working with, and I know there isn't much room to work back there, and that any kind of septic system put in is most likely a large upgrade over what currently exists. But I'm curious, Rebecca, have you been out on site here at all? And curious if you have any thoughts or comments.
I have been out on site. One just point of clarification, a lot of people do this. On the plans, you highlighted the 75-foot BVW buffer as the 75-foot adjacent resource area. That is incorrect. So the 75-foot the outer portion of the 75-foot adjacent upland resource area actually is the same as the 100-foot BVW buffer. So you would go from the outer 25 to the out 75 feet, and that would reach the same. So just a point on this particular site. On this particular site, though, I think it is very important to include that 75-foot because it is such a very tight site, so the commission can understand. So I appreciate you keeping that on there. I just wanted a point of clarification. It is a very tight site. The area that the septic is currently proposed is currently lawn area. Much like you've heard reiterated throughout this evening along Main Street there. That's the extent of the lot, usable area of the lot. We have seen people actually using the opposite side of the brook by going under the stream. That is less preferred if it's possible. And on this site, obviously there is room on this side to do this. So I don't really have a significant concern. Other than if there is an ability to pull it closer, but where they're moving the well to the front, they have to meet that offsite as well. So that's why I'm understanding that Board of Health did approve that. I also got that notice from one of my coworkers just to confirm that before this evening's meeting. The item that I don't see on here, and maybe it's in the verbiage and I didn't see it, and possibly, is the removal. So part of this is it's a failed system in cesspool, as Matt described, but there is a pipe that goes from the system directly to the brook. That in the enforcement order is required to be removed. I know it's capped, or it should have been capped recently, or after that enforcement order was issued, but that pipe itself needs to be removed. That was part of the enforcement order, and I didn't see any detail on the plans referring to that, and that's something, maybe it's a phase 2 project, but I don't see if you're excavating the site anyway, why you wouldn't do it at the same time, I guess, is my
Yeah, we
question.
can tell Curtis to do that. I was aware of you telling us that, Rebecca, so we can, if that's required, we'll just include that in what Curtis is going to do.
Okay, so it definitely is required. It's in the enforcement order
Yep.
requirement. But that's just something that I didn't see on the plans, that when the commission's asking for my comments, that's just something that I'm bringing up. But that's the only item that, and again, that's under the enforcement order, so you can carry out that work under the enforcement order. And then include it in any sort of as-built associated with any notice of intent, order of conditions that the commission may be considering.
Okay, what I can do is, if the commission grants the order of conditions for the removal and wants to allow the pipe removal to continue under enforcement, which is obviously a valid option for you, I will make sure that, you know, the erosion protection is set up first, the pipe removal is done first under the enforcement order, and Rebecca, we would have you come out on site to view the erosion protection and review the scope of the enforcement order prior to doing the other work. The remainder of the system is proposed to be left abandoned in place.
Okay.
You see note 1 of the plan, it says existing tank and system to be abandoned per 310 CMR 15.354, which when Evan writes that usually means to be abandoned and left in place.
Yep, so I do see
He tries
that.
to He tries to
the pipe-
minimize the excavation, so.
Yes, I understand that, and that is typical. If you were on for a prior meeting, the commission is actually allowing that on another site, but rather they're abandoning it, sort of filling it and decommissioning it per se. But that pipe in particular, because it goes directly to the brook, that's the piece that I'm most concerned with, and that should not just be abandoned in place, that needs to be removed. So that.
No, we will
again,
have that
that's
removed under
just-
the enforcement
That was
order.
what I did not see in the notes, so that's all, that's why I brought it up.
Okay. All right. I'm not sure that I have any additional comments or questions at this time, but let me ask, other commission members have any questions, comments regarding this particular project?
Nope.
Not seeing any. Are there any members of the public here tonight to discuss this particular project? I think I'm not seeing any. Okay. So Rebecca, basically, as this has been submitted, it looks like it covers most of what we would require. I take your point about the existing pipe, but it sounds like we're basically covered under the existing enforcement order, that needs to be removed in that, so we don't need to make sure we add it to these conditions. I don't know if it is worth, well, I would say usually we do put in a condition, it might be in here, I've not read through all of these, where the erosion controls need to be in place and approved by the conservation agent before work can begin. If these aren't on this plans, it's probably a condition I would recommend we put in. But I'll open it up again. Any commission members, comments, thoughts, questions? All right, so not seeing any. Notes real quick. All right, I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for 727 Main Street, map 1, parcel 34.
So I'm sorry, so do we, what do we do next?
Robin, I'll give you a call and I'll explain that to you.
So is this going to delay the project further? Because
So they haven't made a decision yet. The chair is getting to that. So you have to close the hearing before you make a decision. So
okay.
Yeah. And I was gonna say, if you were present for the end of our last hearing, the same type of thing came up. So say we agree to it and we'll put it out to a vote in a second.
Okay.
Then there's a 10-day appeal period where any member of the public can appeal it for 10 days. And at the end of that 10 days, basically you can begin, if that
Okay.
makes sense. Okay. All right, so in that case, I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for 727 Main Street, map 1, parcel 34. Do I hear a second for closing?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, starting with Paul,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I'm an aye as well. All right, I'd like to make a motion that we issue an order of conditions for 727 Main Street as drafted and discussed at drafted, presented, and discussed at this evening's meeting, with the additional condition that erosion controls need to be in place and approved by the town's conservation agent before work can begin. Do I hear a second for issuing that order?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, starting with Paul,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I'm an aye as well.
Thank you very much for your
you.
consideration. Rebecca and Robin, I will be in touch with both of you. I appreciate your guys' time, and it was good to see all of you again.
All right,
Thank
Matt,
you.
take care.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Rebecca, it looks like we've gotten through all of our updates and now, oh, I'm sorry, we have to go back to our first public hearing this evening. Almost forgot. Is everyone here for South Bolton Road, the subdivision roadway?
Yes, it looks like that's the case. We have Brian, Daniel, and I believe Jeff might be on the phone again.
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm just gonna rename you.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Unfortunately, I was not able to make it out to the site visit. Either one of the commission members or Rebecca want to give a quick rundown of what they saw on the site visit. And Rebecca, if you have a map or an overview of anything you put on screen of the project, I would appreciate that as well.
If you bear with me for one moment.
Take your time.
All right, is everyone able to see? One moment. This is the. So for the site visit, Brian, I'm going to mute you for right now from Haley Ward because you have a little bit of background noise going on. Thanks. Okay, sorry. So myself, Jim, Brian, Matt Morrow, and Paul were out on site, and we walked through the site, essentially coming off of South Bolton Road, walking towards the rear. We did not make it all the way to the opposite side, if you can see my mouse, of this wetland system here. So this back corner, but we did make it up to the ridge over here. Interestingly enough, probably about where this solid line that cuts across on the plans, or the darker solid line there is a row of snow fencing and some Bolton conservation boundary markers. We were surprised by this. I don't have clear information, and it didn't seem that Brian had been able to locate any information either on why that was located there, potentially from a past project or maybe from the adjacent property for some reason. So I am still looking into that, but I couldn't find a direct answer. In particular to this project, I don't know. I think it is relevant in the sense just to make sure that there's nothing on the property. I'll let Brian speak to what he looked at and maybe potentially found or his process of looking into that in a moment. But it is important to note that that is part of the portion of the parcel that will become open space, or they are proposing to have become open space and potentially held by the town or a conservation restriction. So no development is proposed past that snow fencing. But I think that would be helpful to get some information on. That being said, we did walk through, we took a look at the resource areas. I did not have any question as far as the way they were delineated. I think Matt Morrow did a good job. And in addition to that, excuse me, I don't have my directional here. But to this side of the site, we have wetland resource areas that were a little bit more difficult to delineate clearly because they're not as well defined by topography, but they were defined. I don't have a question with how the flagging was placed. This larger wetland system here that then feeds off site, that also I don't have questions on how it was flagged because that was primarily driven by topography on top of the other, or hydrology, on top of the other wetland indicators. And Matt was present if we had questions, and we didn't have any significant questions. There are some monitoring wells throughout the property as well. There was a clearing back here where it seems someone has created a shooting range. So I would just say if that's being considered for open space to the town, to remove that. If that is part of it, if it's not, and it's part of the lot that's being developed, that's at the discretion of the property owner and out of our jurisdiction. But in terms of where the houses are going, where the driveway is going, I think the applicant's doing a sound job of keeping things outside of the jurisdictional area to the best of their ability. The other comment I would make, I did send a message to the applicant's representative earlier, inquiring about if they were required to do a MIPA review or a MIPA filing, and in addition to that, any insights from MISA. And I had asked for any timeline on that because typically the commission likes to reference any natural heritage or MISA or MIPA conditions within any potential orders of conditions, as you've seen already in the process this evening. And they were unsure of a timeline from when they would hear back, but that's just something to note that's occurred since the site visit. I don't know if Jim or Paul would like to add anything about the site visit at this time.
No, I think you've done an excellent job capturing it all, Rebecca. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the only other thing we asked about was tree removal inside the buffer zone, and I think we did get some information around that.
Right. Thank you, Paul, for bringing that up. I had forgot to mention that we did receive the tree removal plan that was submitted to the commission. I will note that it wasn't submitted last Thursday by noon per the commission's requirement. So the commission may need more time to review that. I admittedly have not had time to go through that as well as I wish I could. But we do have that document now, and Paul's absolutely correct. That was a document that was required of the applicant.
Okay. So it sounds to me like people are generally comfortable with the orders, but would like, I for one would like to hear from MISA especially. I'd like to get their comments, especially on projects this size. And I'd love to hear more about that snow fencing. I'm fascinated to find out what that was, if that's, because this is just off the back end of Century Mill Estates, if it could be something from that or something strange. So I'd love to hear more on that. But as far as the conditions themselves, right now, I don't think I would have anything to add to them as they're kind of crafted, other than getting those answers. Any other commission members have any comments, questions at this time, or other conditions they think would need to be added or changed? All right.
I think the applicant had wanted to say something, Brian, if that's okay.
That is perfectly fine, please.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So
We will get some answers on the timeline for you, Rebecca, but I do believe MISA sent a letter. I believe you were copied on it. They sent it a little bit a while ago.
Yes, and so the email that you had sent, though, maybe you had meant to send MIPA earlier today. When I had asked the question about the MIPA review, you had sent back, you were waiting to hear back from MISA. So I know the letter had come in, but then when you referenced that in the email today, do you want to just clarify that?
Yep, no, we'll get that answer for you. We'll figure out what those timelines are. I just wanted to make sure that you had gotten that initial letter from MISA.
Yes, yep.
Even though we had started the MISA process, we still had to get them a copy of the notice of intent along with the design plans that they already had. So I believe most of it was just to indicate that they did receive the notice of intent, but they put a little bit extra information in that letter. And then I know you brought up the conservation signs and the snow fence that we had seen. We started on this project about 2003, so we have a pretty thick file. And I looked through the entire thing and didn't see anything in regards to having any type of boundary mark on the property. I know nothing was really ever submitted at the time. It kind of went by the wayside. So there's nothing in the deeds. There's no easement documents or any references on at the registry of deeds. So I'm not exactly sure where else I can look, but I struck out and didn't find any info at all.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. And I think you were just as surprised as I was coming across that. Because it's been there for some time. I mean, the markers are grown into the trees. The snow fencing is basically mostly buried under leaf litter and soil and just composted debris.
And I know a couple of the commissioners were there for the site walk, but for those of you that weren't, it's not like it was 25 feet off of a property line, or maybe someone had kind of gone a little bit awry. I mean, it was right smack dab in the middle of the property. It's pretty strange.
Well, yeah, I was to say we'll continue to explore that mystery. I could see us possibly putting in some conditions about removing it.
Yeah, and I guess my concern in reviewing it, and not to talk too much about that this evening, because I'm hopeful that maybe I'll have at least until the next meeting to look into this a little bit more potentially. It just seems very odd, to Brian's point, because it's in the middle of this site. So the only thing I could think of is that something in the initial the initial project of Century Mill Estates, it was part of some conversation. It was never formalized. I'm not sure. Or someone was just way off. I don't know if a volunteer went out there or one of the contracted parties went out and did this, because I do know some of the contracted parties on the adjacent property did put up some boundary markers and some snow fencing during different aspects of the process, at least since I've been here. So that was my concern, is that it's part of something that incorporates that wasn't documented properly. But again, because it's part of what they're going to be proposing as part of their open space, or are proposing as part of their open space, it meets the same. So as long as it's not taking away from a different threshold on a different project, that would be, I guess, the worst case scenario, which I don't think is the case, but that's really the true reason why I'd like to try and dig a little bit more on that. And to Brian's point, I've looked through quite a few files. I've looked through Registry of Deeds as well. So I'm not sure that I'll even find anything, but I think if the commission still has a couple things they need to iron out, or we're waiting for MISA or MIPA, during that time, it can continue that search. And I did reach out to the town planner as well, and I haven't heard back yet, so not sure.
And it is clearly on the applicant's property, right? It's, you know,
Yep.
so it's, you know, even if it was part of another project, it really can't be.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's a curious mystery that, you know, probably shouldn't affect anything else we do unless we find out something really weird. But all that said, to Rebecca's point, Brian, I guess the question is, would you be comfortable continuing to next meeting basically, just for the purpose of, we can kind of put together our boilerplate conditions on something like this. You saw there was no real additional questions from members of the commission. I would like to look at the tree plan, as Rebecca had stated, and again, just to hear back from
Absolutely.
NEPA.
I know you probably need me to request it, so. certainly
If
request
you're
a
okay with
continuance
it.
To the 24th, if I could just keep a bug in the commission's ear about the open space. I know we're working through planning board. The applicant does have an attorney on board to help draft those CRs or open space agreements or whatever they end up being. And he keeps asking me about, the disposition of what we think is going to go forward there. So ultimately, I think it's it's kind of strange. It's the planning board's purview to kind of approve them. But I do think they're looking at the commission in this process here because you guys seem to be the odds-on favorite to take the open space. If we're starting to go down the wrong road, please let us know. We can regroup and try to figure that part of it out. But if I could just ask the commission to kind of keep that in mind as well.
I think the commission would be able to. I will have those internal continue to have those internal conversations with the town staff. But typically you're correct that the planning board approves, the commission informally says, we're willing to hold it. The select board is the one who has to accept the open space or the CR. The Conservation Commission in the meantime makes a vote to accept or not. So there's a lot of moving parts, as I expressed before. But I'm happy to continue that communication.
Great.
Yeah, and I'd add, unless commission members differ, I don't think we have any opposition. Normally, like you said, we would take the land. I don't think we would have any opposition to taking it in this particular instance.
Yeah, and I know Rebecca's been
not taking the land on another project.
Well, I was just going to say, and they try to give us like super fun sites and things that we're going to have to clean up and fix. It's like, no. We don't want that. Yeah.
I'm not sure much these days, but I do know we were smack dab in the middle of that property when we saw those boundary markers. So
yeah, it was odd. I have to line up. I had my GPS on at that time as well. So I'm going to line up where we were in proximity to the 100-foot buffer, because that's sometimes people mark. So it's possible that maybe that was a marker, but the other thing is, before the next meeting, if you could reach out to MISA and MEPA and ask them where they are in the process or if they feel further review is necessary, I think that would be very helpful as well.
Yep, I will do that. And again, like I said at the site walk and whatnot, if you think of anything else or any other questions you may have, please, get them over to us through Rebecca or however, so we can try to have that information for you guys in enough time to have it reviewed. I apologize for the tree plan, but with the holidays and whatnot, and surveyors were out there doing what they could do, but the information is in hand now, so.
Perfect. All right. So all that said, I'd like to make a motion. Give me 1 second, grab my notes. I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for, back to the top, for South Bolton Road Map 2.C Parcel 16 until our next public hearing, Tuesday, January 24th at 7:30 p.m. Do I hear a second for continuing?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, starting with Paul.
Aye.
Jim.
Aye.
Jillian.
Aye.
And Rebecca, I'm an aye as well.
Great. And just one last thing, I appreciate you guys letting me come late to class tonight. I got hung up at another meeting, and I appreciate you hanging on.
No problem. All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, you're
thank
welcome.
you.
Take care. As I started to say, I think earlier, I think we've gotten through everything else on our agenda this evening. Rebecca, is there any business, any open business we haven't gotten to?
Nope.
All right. Commission members have any new business or funny stories? Seeing none. I'd like to make a motion that we officially adjourn the Tuesday, January 10th, 2023 meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission. Do I hear a second for adjourning?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, starting with Paul,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Jillian,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an aye as well.
Wonderful. Thank you
Alright.
so much. Everybody feel better for those who
Thank you all.
need some
very
recovery
much.
time.
Thanks. Have a good
Um,
night.
All right,
Good night.
thanks you as well.
Aye.